Morning all, it's a sunny day, it's Friday. Do some more drawing today, back in the shed. My daughter's doing a little drawing of a rabbit skull. And over here I'm just going to show you a couple of things. We're going to look at birds today. These are all bird skulls. So just a couple of things about bird skulls. I'm aware that if I'm going to do drawing lessons online, I need to find skulls and things and feathers and things you might find naturally. This is a buzzard's feather from a wood in Somerset. So these are different bird skulls, some of them a little bit exotic. This is a cormorant from the Outer Hebrides, and this is a guillemot. You can see that a lot of birds have a bill sheath. They have a covering that goes on on the skull, on the beak. So these sheaths go over the beak and make them look quite different when they've got the sheath on or when it's not on. Some of them you'd recognise, like this is maybe a puffin, but not in its breeding colours. This is a razorbill, for instance. So these are seabirds, so we've moved them aside. So birds you might find. So I'm just move the guillemot out of the way. Right, so birds you might find. You know, these are starling skulls. So no, these ones aren't. These are thrush skulls. Starling skulls have a slightly sharper bend here, and they're quite small. You can see how big it is compared to my thumb. So birds you might find, I've got some sparrow skulls and robin skulls inside. I might show you them later this week. So little bird skulls that you might find like that. You know, you learn to recognise them. This is a pigeon skull. It's got a different shape skull, very round orbit of the eye. This is a pheasant, for instance. This is from Norfolk. You can see a pheasant's got quite a distinctive flap above the orbit of its eye and a very down curved beak. The beak turns down like that. So pheasant skulls are quite recognisable. And of course you find pheasant skulls by roads or on walks in the countryside quite a lot. And then you've got things like this is an owl skull. This is a tawny owl skull. So, you know, it's got a very large eye, the eye taking up a huge percentage of its head. Very good vision for hunting. Massive orbit of the eye. Whereas, you know, something like a crow, this is a jackdaw. Very heavy all-purpose bill for eating things out of the ground. Really, you know, a lot of things that it eats. A very kind of wide range of things, worms and such like in the ground. A nice strong bill on the rook family. And then you've got, I don't know, buzzard skull. So buzzard skull is, you know, very recognisable. It's a predatory skull. It's a bird of prey. You can see the hook on the beak here. And again, down-turned beak, lower jaw, large orbit of the eye so that it can hunt and see accurately, really good binocular vision going forwards. So, you know, a buzzard skull. And owl skulls and buzzard skulls both have that hooked beak, don't they, for catching prey and such like. And then, well, there are many others, and I can show you that as we go forwards. But if you want to look at skulls, obviously you might find your own in the garden or on walks or places you go, like on the beach. These skulls were from London. I went to draw in the Grant Zoology Museum, which is wonderful, part of UCL in central London. Really lovely museum, huge number of bird skulls, like exotic flamingo skulls and hornbills, which are just amazing, kookaburra. So obviously bird skulls are something you might find all over the place and you can look at. And today we're going to be drawing a rook skull. This actually I think it's a rook skull. It's larger than the jackdaw skull and it's got a straighter, longer beak, but normally we have a straight bill sheath on there, much more heavy bill sheath on there, but this one has no bill sheath. So I shall show you how we're going to draw that. Elspeth's drawing a rabbit skull at the moment. You can tell rabbits are different obviously from birds. They've got holes for teeth. Obviously bird skulls don't have teeth, they just have a beak like that. Okay, right, so we're in my shed again, of course, but let's do some drawing. So when you're drawing a skull like this, a bird skull, I would start with some basic shapes. So a circle, drawing a circle shape, and then a triangle shape for the beak, a kind of basic beak shape, and then start building up detail. You can see I'm using a biro here. Biros, we all have biros around the house, don't we? Biros are lovely things to draw with. Don't worry about not rubbing out, it's not important. Just keep it nice and light, and you build up the strength of the drawing as you go along. Just keep it nice and light so you can easily overdraw with heavier marks if you want to. You can see I've just drawn the orbit of the eye there, and I've drawn the hole for the optic nerve. There's a hole in the back of the eye socket in the birds, most of the birds, that kind of through which the nerve comes to control the eye. and send information to the brain, obviously. It looks a bit like a pupil, but it's not. It's just a hole in the skull. So you can see here, having built up the shape of the cranium of the skull, the big back of the skull, and then the beak, I'm now adding details. In this case, I'm adding some shading inside the eye socket. So by adding some hatching, some lines, I'm building up shading inside the eye socket. And of course, once you start adding shading to your line drawing, it gives the skull depth. It begins to look more three-dimensional. So as you're confident that the right proportions are there, then you add that shading, you add some darker marks, so you're a little bit heavier with the pen to make it darker, and then you're reaffirming your lines and going over lines you want to draw attention to. Those dark marks are really important. It doesn't want to just be all too light, and a lot of early drawings when you're learning all look a bit grey, and you want to commit to some darker marks. So you've got light marks and dark marks. But I would say always start light and then build up those dark marks so you can add that three-dimensional quality. You can see here I'm adding all the details to the lines, I'm adding detail to the edges to clarify the beak, and then I'm shading in, again, darker, 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 building up some of those darker tones to show that the eye socket goes into the skull. It's hollow, isn't it? I'm showing that it's not flat. It's not a flat thing. It's a three-dimensional thing. And so by drawing into the back of the beak, drawing the bits that sit behind inside the nose cavity, the breathing nostril area, in there underneath the beak, the back side of the lower jaw, all of those details again adds depth and clarifying the edges. And then at some point you decide you're finished. There's no real finish to a drawing. You've got to decide, I've done enough. Sometimes you can overwork it. Anyway, do your best, enjoy, and I shall keep posting every day. Take care.